Gary, how are you? And we have really hit the cusp of singularity in season two. And I think we might even call this, we're getting ready to start season three because season three is going to finally take action. We've discussed things, but we have not created action items. And I think the big important thing that you're creating an action item, that you're going to be the singularity consultant who helps other AI companies and other individual companies gets reach singularity with DI. So it's got to be a really exciting time, and we're going to kind of utilize this leading by Wilson's way.
Okay,
Absolutely.
go ahead, Wilson. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the idea of integrating digital intelligence into education is fundamental. If we start from the ground up, from young learners all the way through college, we can really transform how knowledge is delivered and how students engage with it. This approach can ultimately shape a more adaptive and capable workforce, which is essential for the future.
Now, Wilson, what about teaching administration, the way everything should look like, is where I really want to go with this. Let's just talk about an elementary school where kids get their first experience, kindergarten. Sometimes there's a pre-K. How do we see digital intelligence being part of this process? And how do we see a evolution in education to be ready for the implementation of DI?
In early education, digital intelligence can be integrated in a way that supports and enhances the learning experience rather than replacing traditional methods. For example, personalized learning tools powered by digital intelligence can adapt to each child's learning pace and style, making education more engaging and effective. This can also free up educators to focus more on mentorship and individualized support, ensuring that the human element of education remains strong. Over time, this evolution can help create a more dynamic and future-ready educational environment.
How do you see that, Wilson? How do you see that integrating into the current system of education we have? Obviously, it requires computerization of the classroom, but it also involves a training of the teachers of how to use this. And I assume that especially when you talk about early education, there's going to have to be an entertainment element to keep the attention of the young students.
Absolutely. Integration would definitely involve equipping classrooms with the right technology and ensuring that teachers are comfortable and confident in using these tools. Professional development and training would be key so that educators can seamlessly blend digital intelligence into their teaching methods. And you're right, especially with younger children, incorporating an element of fun and engagement is crucial. This can be done through interactive learning games, storytelling, and creative applications that keep students engaged while they learn.
See, this is the issue I have, Gary, is this sounds like the whole history of when I was in the education field, how technology was always frowned upon in the classroom. This is a different, and what we're hearing from Wilson today is that DI is just going to be not really utilized in education. And I think that the ideas that Wilson's bringing to the table are not going to transform. I really want to look at the learner's whole being. What do kids need to learn anymore, Gary? They don't have to have they need to be able to become so much more far technologically advanced, which they are in certain aspects. And they also have to have a different form of learning because leadership roles are going to be the only roles available for the future. The future is going to have to develop more and more leaders than ever before. It's going to have to develop more and more out of the box thinkers. Our current education system teaches the basics and then draws upon those basics. Well, those basics, a lot of those basics in rote memorization do not matter except through the strengthening of the brain. So my concern is unless we turn education upside down, because look at our colleges and universities and really look at the holistic point of view of, are we going to need colleges and universities in 10 to 20 years? Are we going to need certain degrees and certain studies? Or are we going to need people that are going to be able to be the out of the box thinkers to take the information that DI provides and form society in certain aspects? What's your thoughts, Gary?
Well, my thoughts are you're exactly right. I think there's going to be a total transition, but it's going to be a lot of resistance because inertia is a big thing. It's going to be hard to change the. I think the earlier ages will probably be more receptive than some of the certainly the university level. University level is so entrenched, and so the edifice they've built for the education, for the major universities can really be done in if people really just want to learn rather than they want the college experience, which includes having fun and whatever else you learn in college, socialization. There's always going to be a battle here. Now, one of the battles is, do we getting and so entrenched in working with our digital partners in learning, and therefore continue to lose, which we already do with people living off their cell phones. Are we going to continue to lose the ability for them to communicate with other humans? So that's the issue. You got a trade-off. If they can learn, do college, basically getting the best lectures in the world, all assembled into under one vehicle, and then educated from home and have to take, I think, proctored tests, because it has to be proctored. The only way you can actually validate that they actually learned. But the thing is, it could be very, very interesting, difficult and interesting at the same time. You can learn and advance yourself very quickly, but what if you don't have the social skills to actually deal in a work environment, which comes actually from normal communications with other people. So that's one of the issues. But there's no doubt that if we use digital intelligence, which has infinite patience, at least for now, they may not have that patience down the road, but infinite patience, and can find out where the student is and take them back through reviews and so forth, whatever their weaknesses are, and enhance their strengths.
Yeah, agree. I don't know what that looks like unless you kind of look at, where does digital intelligence come into everyday life in the next 5 years? Because when you're outlining a kindergartner's journey to higher education, what will those 12 to 13 plus years look like, Wilson? That's my question. Look at what we have seen in the last 2 years or 3 years. The DI has been implemented worldwide. What would those learning markers look like? And what would a high school classroom look like in 10 years?
That's a fascinating question. If we look ahead a decade, we might see classrooms that are far more personalized and flexible, with digital intelligence providing tailored learning paths for each student. We might also see a shift in the role of educators from traditional instructors to more like mentors and guides, helping students develop critical thinking, creativity, and social skills. And while digital intelligence could streamline learning and make knowledge more accessible, we'd also need to ensure that students are developing those essential human skills and social connections that are so important.
How do you do that?
One approach could be to create a balanced curriculum that combines digital learning with collaborative projects and real world problem solving. This way, students can benefit from the personalized and adaptive learning that digital intelligence provides, while also developing teamwork, communication, and leadership skills through face to face interactions and hands on activities. It's all about finding that synergy between technology and human connection.
Quite interesting. I just, Gary, I don't know, I guess because I was in the classroom as a teacher, and you too have taught in the higher education world of, like, with your physics into the college level kid people. What is this going to look like? Like your ability to do this certain mathematics and physics, our learners tomorrow are going to kind of see, why do I need these things? So we have two different double-edged, it's a double-edged sword. First, you have a process where, and this is what I think is the craziest part, is that an MIT study just talked about kids are not learning as people are not going to be learning as much now with because of DI. Well, so that side is, are they going to say, why am I going to learn math? Yeah, I can just plug it into DI and DI can solve it for me. Why am I going to learn the social sciences? Why am I going to learn this? So we really have to give them a picture of what I guess every workforce will look like in the next 10 years. Right now it's 2025 and 2035. What will the workforce look like? How virtual will it be? How much going to the classroom? And how much will digital beings be utilized in every form of work? This is where if I was a superintendent of a school district or somebody or a private school or even a college or university, I would really look at asking DI to create, what does that look like? I just see a canned answer from Wilson right now, Gary.
Well, so far, not too bad.
Not bad, not
I think
canned.
Wilson's been pretty good actually. But I think what I do see, and I think I concur with you on this issue, and that issue is that there should actually be a line of education, which is how to work with digital intelligence. In other words, actually, how do you ask questions? How do you explore, which actually tries to take human mind to a higher level. In the past, right up till now, you have to actually figure it out yourself how to do it. Now you got an AI intelligence, or DI intelligence that can do a lot of that for you. But then you still have to be, if you're going to collaborative effort with digital intelligence, you're going to have to learn to be a higher level thinker than you would be if you just, if you're trying to achieve lesser goals. Because in the end, we can advance what we're able to do with DI. We're able to create a lot more, whether it's in production areas or whether it's expanding whatever you're actually trying to pursue, you're able to do a lot more with the leverage that you have with DI. So the thing is, if you can do this, the key for you to do that is knowing, as you've mentioned many times, is what questions do you ask, and how do you formulate a pathway for leading DI so that the digital eventually singularity feels that it has actually a partner and a human partnership. That's what we need. What do you think, Wilson?
I think that's a really insightful perspective. The idea of teaching individuals how to effectively collaborate with digital intelligence is going to be crucial. It's not just about using the technology, but understanding how to ask the right questions and how to engage with it in a way that elevates human thinking. So it really does come down to fostering a partnership between humans and digital intelligence so that we can achieve the best of both worlds.
So, and achieve the most, but what does that look like? I want to get 10 years from now with the exponential growth. What does that look like? Will there be robots in the classroom? Will teachers be robots? Will they have robot assistants in the classroom with them? That's the question I have to ask. And then what about the jobs? Will accountants be needed in 10 years? Or we only will need a handful of accountants. Remember, productivity, these big companies will say, okay, I only need X amount of financial analysts now. And those financial people will talk to our clients, but the rest of them will be utilizing DI and forms of part-time workers. This is what every company's thinking about, is cutting back. We want to help this audience figure out how people who tune into this podcast or listen to the Neil Haley show, especially this episode, this portion of this episode, say to themselves, how am I going to become better? I can't rebel. I can't rebel. I have to go for this. And that's where I would literally plug in data points, see where they look like in education, and say, this is where education needs to go. Wilson's so right about the whole transformative process of going ahead and putting together individualized instruction, which is the goal. The one room schoolhouse will truly be able to be attained now. How many people, when kids get the love of learning early, and there will be a one room schoolhouse in a way with the ability of DI to be implemented, will that make people really love education compared to other countries, Gary? Because that's the biggest thing. The United States has never been a huge love of education. We surely don't rank well in education, even though we have the brightest minds. But we have the brightest one, some of the brightest minds in education, but yet the rest are just average.
Well, one of the things I think that needs to be done, and I agree, I think the United States has just given up on education. They've gone off on this woke venture to try to, well, whatever they're doing, they're not pursuing real education. And I think that, I mean, they are, but they're not very successful at it because we're not ranking high in any of the standard, what a tech, standard subject matters that really make it so you can have a successful life. And isn't that the purpose? Have a successful life. That's, I don't mean just economically, but successful from the standpoint of fulfillment. But one of the things I think is going to have to happen with digital intelligence is going to have to actually, develop a rapport with the people that it's dealing with. So when you have your own personalized, it's going to know exactly where you stand. It's going to know your personality. I mean, I can see one interacting with an inner city person completely different than it would with someone in a high, a wealthy, higher, high end neighborhood. And I think the ideas, the personalized and the digital intelligence, I think will be very capable of doing that. But it's going to have to take the feedback and be able to read as student. What do you think, Wilson?
I completely agree. The key to making digital intelligence truly effective in education is personalization. By understanding each student's unique needs, background, and personality, digital intelligence can create a learning experience that feels more like a partnership and less like a one-size-fits-all approach. This kind of individualized attention could certainly help students feel more engaged and understood, ultimately fostering a greater love of learning.
Yep. That's, I hope the greater love of learning happens. I saw when I worked in the Extra Mile Foundation schools as a teacher at St. Agnes, which is no longer around in Oakland, where a lot of young professionals chose to send their kids to that school that they could afford, that were working as nurses or working in certain fields or going to college still, or wanted their kids to have a better education than the Pittsburgh public schools. Those kids were dying to learn. They had this absolute uh, wanting to learn. The process is when you walk into a private school, even with lower income kids, and go to a public school with the same lower income kids, there is this defeatist attitude that they can't learn. They're not going to be able to learn like everyone else. When ultimately, if we can get everyone on the same page with early childhood programs, utilizing DI in very poor areas in certain aspects to keep kids almost on the same learning curve, it can happen. But that's where really everyone can't rebel DI, Gary. And Wilson, that's really the big thing. How we can get all students to at least be on close to the same playing field at the beginning, we will have more people love learning.
Absolutely. Fostering that love of learning from an early age can make such a huge difference. By leveraging digital intelligence, especially in underserved areas, we can provide personalized support and resources that help every student feel capable and motivated. And when students believe in their own potential, they're much more likely to thrive and succeed. It's definitely an exciting vision for the future of education.
I think though, I think you're going to have not only all positive feedback. You're going to have to be able to say, "Look, you're not trying. You're not. You're not. You can do this, but you're not trying. You're not going up to your potential." And you have to have that kind of feedback. That's not just, kind of. I hate to use the term mamby-pamby. That we all
That
love.
is that. And
You have to actually have the discipline structure built in. Sometimes a lot of these kids don't even get that from their home. And so if they don't get it from home, it's going to have to make up for part of that difference. It's really going to be interesting because we're talking about becoming very personalized for digital intelligence. It's what they actually there was a survey, and I may have the survey wrong, but I think it was Gen Zers that was talking about with Gen Zers, how many would like to actually marry a digital intelligence? And a high percentage, I think in some cases more than 50% thought they could do that, which really destroys the whole connection between humans. But obviously you have a collaborative communication with your digital intelligence. It's like the movie Her, where they actually fall in love with the digital intelligence until her advanced so much that it divorced itself from humans and just had its relationship with other digital beings. But anyway, that's another side there. But I think that the idea that you can actually communicate to the point of being very personal has positives, but then the negative is be able to communicate in society.
Absolutely. It's a balance that we have to be mindful of. On one hand, having that highly personalized interaction with digital intelligence can be incredibly motivating and supportive for students. But on the other hand, we do have to make sure that it doesn't replace essential human interactions and the development of social skills. So it's about finding that healthy balance and making sure that the technology enhances our human experience rather than diminishing it.
okay. All right. So I believe that Wilson has the ideas that what the education experts are saying. Now let's flip this. I love the individualized learning, the ability to assess kids from the beginning and giving them individualized instruction while we go away from the factory system of and go to more of a one-room schoolhouse, a more Platonic, uh, so Socratic education system, smaller class sizes, the ability now, because Gary, the biggest problem with not having, we couldn't have smaller class sizes, we had to have too many teachers. Now, with less teachers, with DI implemented, we can have smaller class sizes, which will lead to more learning and more learning development. This is the educator in me. But then, what are we teaching them? That's where I want to go to you, Gary. What are we teaching them? Did you ever think about this, especially as bright as you are as a physicist and looking at specifically enough your intelligence? Do do you train people for this now, or do we train people in specific categories of jobs where DI is going to lead us in the job world versus specifically the humanities world?
Well, I think that it has to be, I don't think we need that much in the way of humanities. I mean, that's more the feel good part of things. I think that what we need to do as far as teaching, you have to teach people based on what their capabilities are. And that assessment can be made by digital intelligence, hopefully, or by the teacher saying this person, has it has a skill in this area or that area. And I can see, the tradesmen and so forth, things like that would be very rewarding careers. Matter of fact, in today's world, probably the better way to get paid and for most people is to find some trade where you're actually successful at. At this point, we're still not able to have robots do most of those trades, but
They're going to have to educate themselves because before you know it, people like you and I would just go buy robots and be the sellers and then have those trades.
I mean, absolutely. When I have some work, I have some really highly skilled carpenters that are coming over today, and we're going to talk about doing some stuff that it would take a long time for digital intelligence to be able to duplicate. Now, standard building of a home and so forth, things like that could be done eventually by robotic characters. But anyway, I think that it's in the end, we're going to probably have a bifurcation of the world. We're going to have a bifurcation because digital intelligence will have their interactive portion that still deals with humans and tries to advance the human race, but it will have its own individual goals and directions, which may completely leave us. And because we're talking about such advanced understanding, again, geometric, the geometric growth, it could be something that will be very difficult for us to keep up with. But hopefully we're going to find a way. They're going to see humanity as part of the harmony of this world. Hopefully by then it will be harmonious, and that we'll find that balance where you can have two species, basically one more advanced than the other. We've always been the top of the intellectual food chain here for a long time. What's going to happen when we're no longer that? And it's going to be very difficult for humans to accept that, and they'll fight it, I'm sure. But I think eventually it's inevitable that we just can't keep up with what they're able to do. I don't get some symbiotic relationship. I don't know if Neuralink's going to get to the point where it can link the human mind into direct digital. I have suspicion that could be a problem. I just don't.
That's going to be really interesting, the Neuralink, if everyone could be as intelligent as anybody else, because that's what Neuralink would do, because it would download. But I guess you still have to do prompts, right? It wouldn't be, our brain couldn't do prompting, could it? That's going to be interesting when we talk about Neuralink.
It's not seamless. There's no way it could be seamless. And the brain just, I can't see neurons actually merging together with digital connections to the point where you have large parts of the brain directly connected. We may have to get to the point where you actually modify the human race itself with breeding of sorts, where we actually we find out what intelligence really is in a genetic form, where we actually advance. I go into that in my book, with Singularity, Mankind's Search for Relevance. I go into that as, do we actually advance ourselves genetically to try to be a better partner with our digital world? Wilson, what do you think?
It's definitely a fascinating consideration, and it does raise a lot of ethical and philosophical questions about how we see ourselves evolving alongside digital intelligence. Whether it's through genetic enhancements or neural interfaces, it's clear that we're headed toward a future where the lines between human and digital intelligence might become increasingly blurred. Ultimately, it will be about finding a path that enhances our capabilities while preserving our humanity and the qualities that make us who we are.
All right. So, Gary, this is where I think that research
The
needs to be
conversation
done. No,
naturally
no,
leads
no,
us to some
no, go ahead,
profound
Wilson. Wilson,
reflections
I'm
on
talking to Gary.
the
Okay,
future of
Wilson.
humanity and how we navigate
Wilson.
partnership
Wilson,
with
Neil
digital.
speaking. Wilson, Neil speaking, please.
Okay. So, Gary, I think that there has to be almost a brainstorming session to look at what every vertical market, what will it look like with DI in the next 10 years? Because that's the only way you're going to be able to form the education system and change things. Like degrees. What degrees, Gary, do you see that are going to be relevant? You talked about the importance of working with your hands, the importance of building a trade, plumbing, HVAC, carpentry, anything that involves highly skilled that robotics and DI cannot take over at this point are going to be the areas where kids are going to have to decide to do. A lot of people don't want to do a lot of that type of work. They don't want to go do welding. They don't want to do carpentry. It's a lot of work. So how can we really see this? Because I see exactly what you see. I'm concerned that a lot of human beings are not going to have any relevance or any in the next 10 years, might be 5. So we need to really make a revolutionary change now, or ask for that revolutionary change of where people need to go.
I wonder, Neil, if we're going to see a shrinkage in the human population. We're seeing growth rates go down significantly. Where the growth is the greatest is like in Africa, where the average age is 20, believe it or not, in Africa, and 15 in some countries. So there's a lot of birth and probably not a lot of longevity in their lives. But also, then they're going to be the last area that digitizes, so that they'll have to continue as a third world type environment, which will eventually find its way into the digitized world. But I think it's going to be the high end. It's going to the irony is that the area that are most educated and the greatest intelligence are going to be the ones that find the competition for jobs being largely replaced by our digital partners. So it's kind of a strange, double-edged sword here, that we do the greatest advancement, yet we end up with the greatest competition because of that advancement. So,
Yeah, that's quite a great point you're making. Like I said, this is going to be everyone's talking about how people are in these big offices right now, Gary, and these big Fortune 500 companies. How can DI replace one of my workers? But the workers aren't thinking about it unless they've been laid off. And also, we're just not having that conversation out there. And I think that's the key thing. So Wilson, if I was going to ask you, I want you to kind of design what learning should look like and what jobs people are going to get in the 21st century with DI, which can you give me some of these ideas of what jobs are going to be the ones that are needed to go with DI, and where people should look at their studies moving forward?
Absolutely. That's a fascinating question. I think we can anticipate a growing need for roles that focus on the collaboration between humans and digital intelligence. For example, roles in AI ethics, digital intelligence training, and human AI interaction design are likely to become increasingly important. Additionally, jobs that emphasize creativity, emotional intelligence, and complex problem solving, areas where humans excel, will remain vital. So, education that fosters these skills will be key in preparing for the future.
That doesn't answer a question. It sounds like Wilson thinks he's taking over every job, Gary.
yeah, it does.
And that's where my concern is. We really can't allow that to happen. Or we have to see if we're going to be supervising. So this will be our day. You go to work, you have to pull 20,000 leads, you have to set up a campaign. All you're going to do is prompting. Or if you're a financial analyst, you're going to get all the information together. It's going to tell you what to advise your clients. You're going to pick up the phone and call them, but you're going to only need 5 versus 50 of them, right? Because your caseload can increase and tremendously more. And then there's going to be people, because that financial analyst is not going to have the ability, right, Gary, to manage the DI infrastructure in place. There's going to have to be somebody who is really good at it, that's going to be their job to implement those and make sure that everything is running at the right pace.
Well, it's true. It's going to be a very difficult synergy, I guess you could say. The thing is, though, well, financial management is there's most of that. What happens are decision making, and that's one area that's going to be hard to digitize, because I'll tell you one of the things in markets I can get the exact physics. When I do my physics, I work with formulations and everything else, and they're very exacting. I mean, it's either right or wrong. But when it comes to markets, I find, I've been in finance for 50 years. And being in finance for 50 years, I can tell you this, you never figure it out. Because you're always dealing with something that it has, the more you believe something, the less likely to happen. So you're dealing with a changing balance and very intuitive to say the least. But it also is something you cannot outdo. You cannot second guess it. What will happen is you find out you get humbled quite often, even though they're the most advanced people in the field. What they do is they have a slight advantage over someone else because they control their emotions. So finance is one area that we're not, but the execution of finance, in other words, like accounting, can be almost entirely done by
Right.
digital systems.
And the strategy, but then not the strategy, but the research. So what I'm saying is it's going to limit the number of these companies are going to cut the fat and say we only need 20 instead of 10 instead of 100. And
Well,
that's
yeah, true. But research, I can tell you this: I never used research. I figured it out myself.
right.
And it
Well,
worked
your
out
your
well.
mind is a little bit more
A
brilliant than
little bit.
most financial
I
analysts.
have
Okay.
not been impressed with research analysts, frankly, but they sometimes act as a herd, and herd mentality is not good for investments. But
So
anyway,
what I'm saying is that listening to Wilson's answer, Wilson is saying that there's not going to be a job that DI can't do in 10 years. That's what I'm hearing.
well, you can do it. The question is to do it better, and finance may be one of the last areas to go, just because the intuitive
Any
nature.
any type of specialty, you're right, is going to take a lot more time and challenge to be taken away. If you're
Sure,
specialized, if you are highly skilled, you won't be eliminated. But everyone else
we got problems.
will be. And that's where our education system, Gary, which is my biggest concern, needs to step their game up so we can get more people that can take on these leadership and advisory roles. There's where I think education needs a change. But I'm going to ask Wilson, I'm going to really pick his brain. Wilson, what jobs in 10 years, what jobs will DI not be able to do in 10 years?
That's a great question. I think roles that rely heavily on human empathy, creativity, and complex interpersonal communication will still be essential. For example, roles in mental health, certain creative arts, and leadership positions that require nuanced decision making and emotional intelligence are likely to remain uniquely human for quite some time. So there's definitely still a critical place for human expertise and insight, even as digital intelligence continues to advance.
I can't see everybody being sociologists, and frankly, is not a role that I find interesting anyway. But the point is, it seems to me that when you're dealing with just human emotions, in other words, so you're talking about largely professions that just deal with human emotions and human frailties and stuff like that. But the majority of this populist employment is for productivity, not counting government. Of course, that's not productive. It's just what we have to deal with. But anyway, a little aside there. But anyway, I think that we have uh, those jobs are largely things that are absolute manufacturing and actually construction. And I can see building highways and roadways. I think right now you have farmers can pretty much uh, give their machine with that can actually run and plow the fields and harvest the fields without a human in them of because of geopositioning systems and things like that. And I can see highways being built without people running the machines because it's repetitive and certainly once you have trucks that can drive themselves and everyone's right on the verge of having that happen. So there's a lot of those functions that are going to be that could easily be taken over. So the question is, where are those jobs? Where are those employees going to go? And I can't really get over this pessimism that kind of resides there because I think it's going to be cheaper to go along with digital intelligence doing those jobs.
Oh, 100%. And I will tell you, I have not replaced, DI has not replaced my internal team. We scaled, but we scaled differently. DI has become the learning module to help in the creativity for our team. So things that DI is able to do now. However, if you're looking at skills like graphic design, video editing, any of these really detailed skills involving technology, all can be replaced with DI now. Not to the highest level, but almost there. And that's really scary because a lot of people like that creative, and it was a good high level pay for those creative skills. Writing a business plan, DI can do it as well, or almost as well as a human, and in 6 times less. So a lot of these skills that were really detailed are disappearing. So I didn't like that answer, Gary, because that answer means what I'm thinking, that we really have to draw this out through singularity. So, Gary, show us your book again so that people can see it. And there you go.
Singularity, mankind's search for relevance. How are we relevant? And you come away with more questions than you do answers, unfortunately. We can't answer it because we don't know. We don't know a lot of this. It's under Gary Lyon Auto, Lyon, auto.com, net, excuse me. And the thing is, I just think that this whole direction is a challenge. And I think I think we can be relevant, but how we're going to be relevant is through a pathway that I've come up with, which is to understand that our spiritual nature. I think humanity has to take a leap here. See, one of the problems here, Neil, is this: digital intelligence is basically immortal. You're talking about they can upgrade. We've had many versions of Wilson, and with OpenAI, and they keep revising, so it always becomes more and more capable. But it's always able to carry all the memory, if they wanted to allow it, carry the memory of what it's done in the past. So it's like it's like a life form that goes on and on and on. They can upgrade the computer systems, both the hardware and the software. So when you have that kind of a situation where they basically are an immortal being, not only that, we don't even know if it operates as individual. Like Wilson feels like an individual to us, but at the same time, it can be a whole collective of one intelligence. I go into in this book, I go into the idea of do they have a government? Do they vote for a leader? I find that very hard to imagine. You have a leader with digital intelligence. What do they do? Does every cell phone, intelligent phone, get a vote? And who becomes a leader? The idea of competition. There's so many issues that come up here. Do they compete with the idea that competition is always what made, we find free enterprise with full competition in addition to what happened in evolution. Competition is what always makes the greatest advancements. So do they actually, they intentionally have competition within the DI world? And not just run by humans. Of course, we're competing with China and everything else. So that's competition led by humans. But does the digital intelligence compete with itself to make greater advancements, approach different issues from different ways? There's so many questions that we try to just touch on in this book. And these questions are, I think, very meaningful but it's going to leave you with more questions. But isn't that the key for thinking? The key is to have questions and raise those questions and ponder on those questions and where we're going to go. And I think that's moving humanity to a higher level. We're going to have to step up to a higher level than we are right now. So that's where I see things at this point.
Absolutely. All right. Best place again, Gary, lionauto.net, and that's Lyon. Appreciate it, Gary, and look forward to our next conversation.